The smart home market seems like it's an ideal fit for Apple, but what does the company have to show for its efforts so far? On today's show, we're talking about Apple and its approach to the smart home, what it does now, what we could see in the future, and that's all in this episode of the Macworld Podcast. Welcome to the Macworld Podcast. I'm Roman Loyola here with Jason Cross.
Good morning.
And Michael Simon.
Hello, sir.
Today's show is another episode where we take a deeper look into an Apple product category in the lead up to WWDC, which is about 6 weeks away. Last week we talked about the iPad, and this week we're talking about Apple's smart home efforts. Maybe we should start off by talking about what they do now, which isn't really much because they don't have hardware really. Do you guys count the HomePod as a smart home device?
Whenever they have something to announce HomePod, like HomePod Mini or new HomePod Mini features or something in a keynote, it's always in a section where they're like, and now we're going to talk about the home. And then they have their like fake home that's missing a wall, to show all the rooms in the house. And HomePod's always part of that. So I think they think of HomePod and Apple TV as Apple TV hardware, not Apple TV Plus, as home.
I mean, when you think of the smart home, you think of Echo and Alexa. You think of Google Assistant / Gemini and the Nest Home Hub stuff. So I think that's, analogous to what Apple's doing. Even though it's marketed somewhat different, I think it's still a smart speaker and part of the smart home.
Yeah, especially when the original HomePod first launched, it was really all about music because that's the only thing it did well, like better than others. So they focused on that. Apple TV obviously predates all this smart home stuff, but now it has sort of become the center of people's, I don't want to say the center of people's smart home because like Mike said, the assistants you talk to, that's the middle of the web for all your smart home stuff, whether it's thermostats or doorbells or whatever. They think of it as a smart home thing, and it is a smart home hub in the Apple sense of it's a piece of technology that if you have this on your network, all of your other devices work remote and stuff. You have to have either a HomePod or an Apple TV in order for all your devices to like your home app, the home app to work like offline and do scripting and all the other kind of stuff it does. So automations and all that.
The Apple TV and the HomePod, they don't change from year to year. They're not updated on a regular basis, it even feels like.
I mean, Apple TV, I know it acts as a home smart home hub. I'm willing to bet if you polled 1,000 people and asked, is Apple TV a smart home product? Like they'd be like, no, it's a streaming box, but it does do like the main smart home thing that you need for like everything to kind of work. People just don't realize that it's doing it.
It feels like though Apple kind of relies more on software and by providing the Home app and HomeKit and, its developer resources to get other companies to create home products that work in the ecosphere.
Yeah. And more recently, of course, their support of Matter. They're one of the companies that made Matter happen. And then they are firm in their support. They as soon as new versions of Matter drop that support new products, it doesn't take them very long to build that support into iOS and basically the Home app, iOS, and all those other things. So
Matter is very similar to HomeKit in the sense that a couple years ago, everything supported Assistant, everything supported Alexa, and you had to buy a separate HomeKit thing. And when you found a product that supported it and when you bought it, like the setup experience mainly, was so much better. Like it would just automatically recognize it, takes you through the AirPod-like setup stuff. Like it's fantastic. And that's kind of what you get with Matter in the sense that it does work with everything, but when you use it with an Apple device, you get that seamless, easy setup. It quote unquote just works. And, it's much better than that piecemeal solution before. And that's kind of where Apple went off the rails almost immediately. Not only was HomeKit not supported by Alexa and Assistant products, they were generally $5 to $20 more expensive than those options. So people just avoided them, and rightfully, I don't blame them, because there's nothing really different back then between a HomeKit product and an Alexa or Google Assistant product. It was just the manufacturer had to make it a certain way, which meant it was harder to do. There were fewer of them, so they charged more.
Yeah, they literally had a piece of hardware that they had to put in there that was for security and to make the easy one-touch setup and stuff like that. Like it was literally licensing and buying like a chip that they had to put in that they didn't have to put in for other products, and that I don't think Apple charged licensing for HomeKit, but they probably charged for certification. So like you don't have to license it, but it still ends up costing you more. So like you said, yeah, you ended up paying more. And outside of having a fairly easy setup process, it really, the products weren't different. They weren't better. There were just fewer of them. They changed all that just so that people know, even the HomeKit stuff, even when we don't talk about Matter, they changed that so that there was a software solution developers could do for all the security stuff that needs to happen with HomeKit. That dropped the prices and you started to see some more stuff, but Matter's really where it needs to go. Just get away from 3 different ecosystems for the same stuff. And it's working pretty well in certain areas. We're starting to see, especially for things like lights and plugs and a couple of other things, we're starting to see Matter be the most common area where everything new that comes on the market supports Matter. And sometimes the other things specifically as well, and where we're not seeing it are in things like security systems and doorbells and stuff like that.
Yeah, and eventually it's going to be you just buy something. Like that's the goal here, is that all of this is invisible and you buy it and it works with whatever you have. And we're really close to that happening. Like Jason
in
said,
some categories for sure, and other categories I think it might be a while.
Right, like even before Matter, Apple made it easier so you could get a product that supported Alexa and Google Assistant and Siri. You know, you just look for that Matter logo. It's on most of the cheaper plugs, the TP-Link plugs and things like that. Like, so you get like, I don't know, 4 of them for $25 or something. Like that's all Matter now. Light bulbs are, and yeah, the doorbells and the higher end stuff, cameras, that's a little trickier, but you know, we're getting there.
It does feel like to me though that Apple seems to have a perception problem that, and this is as someone who doesn't have a smart home and not really have no plans to integrate that in my house. It just feels like because it's so reliant on third-party products and Apple's job is just to provide interoperability, that it doesn't feel like they're there. Does that make sense what I'm saying? That they don't have a strong presence. I don't think that perception is correct, but I feel like that's the perception because their main 2 products, like if you count Apple TV, aren't really strong products in terms of presence.
Yeah, and even though they go under different brands, like the main brands for smart home stuff really aren't the ecosystem providers. To some degree, Google is, if you know that Google is Nest, which a lot of people don't. Nobody knows that Ring is Amazon, like that they bought Ring. But those are the brands, things like Nest, Ring, not Eve, Era, not Ecobee, things like that. Those are the brands that people know, and they're not the ecosystems. And Amazon has another smart home brand that kind of competes with Ring as well for some cameras and stuff. So I don't think Apple's kind of alone there, but I think they're different in that, especially from Amazon, in that they control this big ecosystem of phones and tablets and computers and stuff like that, even more so than Google does. Even though Android's more popular, I'm just talking about like laptops and everything too. They're just more all over the place.
And back when this was getting started and everybody was like, when it was hot and everybody like, oh, look, I can control my lights and my switches with these things. Most of them weren't compatible with HomeKit. So the ones that people bought 5 or 8 years ago when everybody was buying them, when Amazon was giving away Echoes, like they don't work now. So you have to change over your home. And I noticed because I did it over the last, 12 to 18 months. You have to like piecemeal change everything. And it's a pain. It's a pain and it's expensive.
I keep looking at that. I look at our Ring. We have Ring for a security system, doorbell, and so a couple other cameras that go with it. And I'm like, boy, I'd really like to get some other. And then you start looking at it and you're like, oh my God, I have to change like so many things.
Everything. Yeah.
To make this work. It's like, I just stick with this for another year or two until there's a bigger gap between what I want and what I have.
Yeah, I had the Ring doorbell. I had a couple of Ring security cameras, and I moved over to Simply Safe. And the only reason why I did that is because I had ADT, and that got too expensive, so I dropped them and I got a new security system. And so I looked for one that was HomeKit. But if you already set that up, like Jason's talking about, like it's a pain, it's a hassle. You got to take everything down, you got to reconfigure everything, and you're looking at hundreds of dollars per device for some of them. It's a lot, and Apple really missed that early boat that everybody jumped on. Most people, I'm going to say probably less than 10%, bought HomeKit stuff and they didn't even realize they were not necessarily doing it because Amazon promoted the things that worked with their system, which also generally worked with Google. So like you had to seek out HomeKit originally.
They had this opportunity where maybe they should have, more than 5 years ago, really started to make at least some smart home products, what I'll call edge products, as opposed to the hubs like HomeKit and Apple TV, like edge products. And they didn't, and now they're starting to. But before we get into that, just because this is sort of the state of, we should talk about the Home app and what it is and where it is, because I think that's a real friction point for people. I think a lot of people do whatever they do with their smart home with Siri, and if they don't, it's really hard to control. Like a lot of people don't know the Home app, really, where it is, what it does. It's frustratingly the same as the Google one. If you have a Google, they're completely different apps in terms of design. But when you're looking for the icon, you have two apps with a picture of a house that say home, and you don't know what's what. And the Home app for Apple has a very different design than kind of everything else in their ecosystem. It doesn't look or act the way other things do. It got a little better more recently, but it still feels completely out of phase with Apple Music and Notes and just kind of every reminders, every other Apple app. It just doesn't fit. So I wonder if in this big iOS 19 change, one of the things we're going to see is a fairly significant overhaul to how Home, the app, works and looks and behaves. If not right when iOS 19 drops, then maybe in a 19.3 update, that we keep hearing about.
Yeah, they set that foundation, I don't know, was it a year ago? There was a whole issue with it, with the new Home app architecture, where they rolled it out and then there was a problem with it. I think that was iOS 17. Like they're finally kind of getting everyone they're forcing everyone to upgrade that to the new architecture. I'll be honest, I don't quite understand what it really means because the interface doesn't change. The and there shouldn't be any change that you see, but presumably on Apple servers somewhere, it lays the groundwork for like the next generation of support.
It's a complete change to the technology by which all of your products talk to each other. So it's nothing you're going to see. It's all about the sort of networking and protocols and how those things are handled and stuff like that. So yeah, it's invisible to the end user.
What's the point? Is it faster? Is it future proofed? Is it?
It's all those things. The old architecture was notably slow. You had a lot of sort of delay. It wasn't very resilient about sort of like if it can't reach your device through one path of networking, going from this device to your router to this, then going another route. The messaging was sort of, it sent large messages, that like fairly larger bits of data for all these things, which isn't good when you have like Bluetooth LE devices that need to be small and light. So yeah, it was a complete overhaul pretty much of all the, how does HomeKit talk to each other? How do HomeKit things talk to each other? I haven't looked deep into it or would understand it if I did, but my understanding of it is it much more closely matches what Matter does and how it talks to each other. So it's sort of, I wouldn't say it's identical, but it's much closer to that. So it's just a more modern communication standard for all these smart homes things. I have noticed that once things sort of got updated and switched over, that there is much less delay when I tell Siri to turn on a light or something. It's like pretty instant. And it used to be like, you used to have to give it a second. Sometimes the delay would be just long enough you would start to say it again, like you thought maybe it didn't
Yeah, yeah.
hear you, and then the light would come on, you'd go like, ah, and that kind of thing never seems to happen anymore. It's pretty slick now. So
Oh, maybe we should talk about what Apple is reported to have in the works for the smart home. There's been discussion for a while of a HomePod with a screen. Now, that has taken on different forms.
that's 3 different products as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
There are 3 different things that are all, quote, the HomePod with the screen that are all coming. The most simple one is that there's apparently an update to the HomePod, not the mini, but the large HomePod, where the glowing lights on the top are more of a display. It's not going to have a whole interface and stuff, but it's a fancier display there for the glowing lights and stuff on the top. I could care less about that because it points up across the room, so it's useless as a screen. I don't even know why they're putting screens on these things, but that's one product. The other is the thing you're talking about, which everyone's sort of started to call HomePad, because we think that's what Apple probably would call it. But it's this totally new category device where it's about it. They say it's about an 8-inch screen, but not the same aspect ratio. It's more square-ish screen than what we have today. So a new aspect ratio. And it's meant to be battery operated, although you could plug it in. It could hang on a wall, like in an entryway or something. It's meant to be very, very cheap. And it's meant to have an interface, a whole new interface that is sort of derived from the standby mode of an iPhone. If you put an iPhone on a charger and turn it sideways, you know, you get the clock and all that, the other widgets. So like this sort of widget-based thing that's derived from the technology from standby and isn't going to have an app store or anything. It's just, it'll have a camera. You can do FaceTime. It's to control all your smart home stuff. It'll have a whole new interface, but that's all it is. It's the equivalent of Google's Nest hubs or something, probably with a lot less speaker to it, though. It's a flat pad that you could stick on.
Yeah, and there's a report that it would have a dock, like a HomePod style dock that you could.
Yeah, potentially some
speaker, like a
separate speaker dock kind of thing, and it's meant to be affordable. Everybody's saying like this is not supposed to be an expensive product. They're really pushing to have like really inexpensive displays and all this other stuff because this is an accessory that they need to make their money on at $299 or something, because it needs to be something people would buy maybe multiple of. It's not going to have an app store. They're not going to make a lot of money after the sale.
But the fact that it's square is kind of interesting to me because it kind of does two things. I'm guessing we haven't seen the UI, but I'm guessing that makes it's square-ish because it's more suitable for the UI. But then it's also square-ish because it separates it from an iPad in terms of like design. So that way it's more obvious that it's not an iPad.
This might have nothing to do with it, but the rumored folding devices are also expected to have that 4:3 aspect ratio, so perhaps it's just kind of normalizing that look. But yeah, it makes more sense. Like those widescreen, like the Nest is more widescreen, like the smaller ones, like those are tricky because it's like, why is it so long? So I think that makes more sense for putting a bunch of controls on a screen rather than having them wider.
Yeah, that the widescreen format we're used to with computer monitors and even an iPad is great for watching a movie or something, but these devices are not made for that. I'm sure you'll be able to pull up a video for cooking instructions or something like that, but it's really not a long-term media consumption device. Yeah, I'm really curious to see what it is because there's been all these mock-ups. They're wildly different. It's a different size. It's a different aspect ratio. It's meant to be real inexpensive and wall mountable, and which makes me think, well, if it's wall mountable, it's not going to be the kind of thing where the battery lasts. You have to charge it every day.
Yeah, wall mountable is always great in theory until you realize there's a big giant plug hanging from it, or you need to charge it every other day.
And then the third product, I guess, might be the most exciting product because it's supposed to have a robotic arm that's supposed to be able to follow you around.
Yeah, also the HomePod with a screen. But yeah, the base would be something like a speaker and it would have a robotic arm with a basically an iPad for a face, a robotic arm that could follow you around and point at things and all this other stuff. And I wasn't sold on the idea till I saw they published sort of a research paper with some videos of just some research they did into using AI to give lifelike movements to a lamp. They had a robot lamp, and the robot lamp was, first of all, the light was basically a projector, so it could project little images on a wall or something, and it had a little speaker and a little camera, so it could see what it was doing. And it was like having a Pixar character come to life in your house. It was amazing. First of all, I want the lamp, but now I'm really excited about the idea that they're going to make like basically a HomePod with a robot arm and a screen on the front. I'm like, it's like a living thing. That is further out though, because they have to do all this AI work around recognizing you and what does it do, and how does it work?
Yeah, we all know about Apple's AI travails.
Yeah,
Recently.
that's. I think we've already heard that a lot of their smart home efforts, not just these 3 HomePod with a screen things, have gotten sort of sidetracked as they refocus on, well, gee, we broke Siri and we haven't been able to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like either under or overlying all of this talk is that Siri needs to be fixed first. We just saw Google introduce Gemini, Amazon introduced Alexa Plus. Like, Siri is still Siri. It's still the old, not very smart, can only do a couple of things Siri. So, like, that's first. Presumably that's coming in a couple of months. We'll see. But, like, that foundation really needs to be rock solid in order for any of this to work.
Even the current series feels in a lot of ways worse than it used to be. Like, it feels like it's regressed. You always see somebody just like asked on Sunday, they asked, is it Easter? And it gave some boneheaded answer. Like, it should have just said yes, but it was like,
do you want to ask ChatGPT?
Yeah, do you want to ask ChatGPT? And then other times you'll ask it something and it'll say, it'll tell you about next year or something. It's just so bad at like the basic stuff that it has been able to do. So they need, without Siri being fixed, kind of none of this stuff works, because that is going to be a primary, if not the primary way that people interact with most of these things.
There was rumors that Apple was going to do something at WWDC, but that's going to be postponed now. Am I correct in that? Or it's not clear.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we just don't know. That HomePad thing was originally supposed to come out this spring, and now it has been pushed back to the fall because of Siri problems, but not just Siri problems, but because they want the interface to match the iOS 19 overhaul. So maybe it gets announced at WWDC, but maybe it becomes a next year product. That's supposed to be the sort of first early of these home products that Apple does. So you would think if there's a lot of ways that developers will tie into them, that they'll want to talk about it at WWDC. One of the Siri features that was supposed to drop this spring, that was supposed to make the HomePad work and stuff, was that App Intents thing, where it'll be able to work within all these other apps via this real big expansion of App Intents, and be able to do things within your applications. And that whole system is supposed to underlie what's going on with this sort of HomePad device. And that's not ready.
Yeah, all of that. Working with apps, seeing what's on your screen, like the things that they advertised back in September, like all that stuff. We're still, that's step one of all of this. And they're already like 18 steps behind. So,
Yeah.
This has to happen relatively quickly.
There were also reports that Apple is thinking about entering other markets with, their own smart home devices.
It's true. And the two that we've heard about in rumors was a doorbell and home security camera type stuff. Although I don't think they necessarily would have called it home security, but basically an in-home camera. And the advantage to that was supposed to be it was super private. Like, it wouldn't. There's already HomeKit video cameras that use encrypted video stored locally and do all the processing, all the AI processing and stuff sort of on your Apple TV. It has to have a home hub, your Apple TV or your HomePod. Sort of an evolution of that. But the whole idea is it would use Apple Intelligence to know who's in a room and what's happening. And it could do things like work with the home app and automations and stuff to have your music follow you around the house by seeing you through the cameras, but it all happening locally on devices on your network, not sending stuff off to the cloud. Or my guess is potentially now Apple's going to use its sort of private cloud compute for some of this stuff. But everything today in that space, in that home security space and stuff like that, it either comes from a security company who installs hard drives in your house and you have a local thing, or all the ones that are Ring and Ecobee and all those other things. It's all in a cloud somewhere else with terrible security. Human beings review footage. Like it's a mess, right? So they're going private and secure. And same thing with the doorbell. Like everything processed locally, private and secure. But the magic they want to bring to that is Face ID. So opening the door to your house the way you open your phone. I'm curious about that because like on the one hand, that's very futuristic. Spy movie, like entering a thing like retina scan kind of thing. On the other hand, doorbells are kind of low compared to people, especially for a tall person like me. My face is not exactly near the doorbells. Is it going to angle up? Is it going to work at a distance? Or do I need to bend over toward my doorbell to get into my house all the time?
Well, in most of those spy movies, they're throwing their face right in front of the sensor.
Oh yeah, because it's like doing a retinal scan and stuff, and also that's a cool cinematic thing, right? But like the doorbell's supposed to be, and one would assume it's going to have like a really awesome video quality and stuff, because how could Apple not also be that? But I guess the idea is it could start to recognize other people, right? It would be Face ID for you, but it would also just see your neighbors at the door, and then you would know, like a notification could pop up on your phone saying who is at the door, right? If it's somebody you know and stuff like that. So adding some intelligence to these kinds of things is where Apple would be going. And I think all of that has kind of been put on hold, if not indefinitely, then at least until they figure out all the Siri stuff. Like there's been a complete shuffling of responsibilities within Apple for Siri. So and that's got to impact all this stuff.
Is there anything you wish that you wanted Home to do for the longest time and it still hasn't?
I don't necessarily have a wish list of like specific things that I wanted to do, but like I would love for it to, like, all this stuff to just like work better. Like what Jason was just talking about, the doorbell stuff. I mean, that's obviously down the line and would require like new products. But like anticipate the things that I want to do. Like every night when I go to bed, I shut the lights off. I hit the thing. Like if it knew, okay, your Apple Watch is on, your heart rate went down, you're going to sleep, shut the lights off, like things like that. Or there's no one, I haven't seen movement in a while. So I'm going to assume that it's 1 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock at night, whether the time is. I'm gonna shut the lights off. Like things like that. Like it's not smart. It's automated. Like there's a difference. And that's what I'm really looking for. And I don't know if we're 6 months away or 6 years away from that, because no one's really doing it. This isn't an Apple issue. It's a smart home issue. Like the smart home stuff it's all very cool and neat, but it still needs a lot of input. It just looks nicer. Like the doorbell camera is super cool, but like it's just a camera. Like there's nothing intuitive about it. If we can reach a point where these things like anticipate it, like Jason said, like, okay, your mom's at the door.
Yeah, some proactiveness.
Right? Yeah. Like, and that's kind of an issue I have with all of this, AI stuff. The coolest parts of the phone, the Apple Intelligence on the phone, are the things that I don't have to do. I don't have to think about. And there's not much of that right now. So, it feels in some ways that it's never going to happen, because they've had a decade plus to do this. And instead we're building functionality and features on top of each other, all of which require the same level of understanding and input that, I could turn a light on myself. Like, you should know, okay, he just walked into the room, and it's 6 o'clock and the sun's going down, so let me turn the lights on. Like things like that.
If I have cameras in my house, I would love for them to, without recording and sending video footage everywhere, sort of locally be able to recognize, I recognize who it is. Say they walked into the kitchen, turn the kitchen light on. because I need to see what I'm doing. And then when I leave, go, nobody's in the kitchen, and then turn the kitchen light off after a minute or so, right? That sort of thing, you can kind of do that now. There's all these smart switches that have like motion sensors and stuff like that. And you've got to fiddle with it and set it up, and it's a pain. Like I've done that, and it's in like places like my laundry room and my bathroom, and they're great because you always forget to turn those lights off, and you don't want to go turn those lights off. But yeah, more of that proactive smartness everywhere would be amazing.
And those sensors and things that you just talked about, like that, for one, you got to buy one. For two, you got to buy the right one. It has to interact with your stuff. You got to set it up. You got to set it up the right way. And it's, it takes time. Most people aren't going to do that. They're just not.
And I'd love for these things to work together better. Like, if my neighbor comes over, that comes over all the time, is at my door and I'm not home, and I see a thing on I should be able to get a notification that pushes through if it's somebody I know, right? Like I should be able to identify people, and it would just say, oh, I recognize that's Paul. And then a notification would push through, and I'm out, I'm not home. But he brought over some cookies his wife made or something, and I can go, oh, hey, Paul, let you in. And then it would automatically, like, it would unlock my door, it would turn off the alarm, let him come in, and then when he left, relock my door and turn on the alarm. Like, that's not that complicated a thing for us to intuit, but I think it's really complicated to make, and it's the kind of place where there's a lot of room for advancement in this space. Like, that's the kind of stuff this space could really do a great job at. Amazon's tiptoeing into it with the home key thing and it's not super smart, but it's that thing where, like, hey, if you get a package, your Amazon person can open your garage door.
Yeah, but that's just because I gave them the code to my garage door. Like that's not, and I use
they have
that
a
for
specific time limited thing. It's like, right, like it's more secure. Like they can't come do it whenever. It's only like when you have a package being delivered and all this other kind of stuff. But it's still that sort of like, I don't have to fuss with it.
Yes.
Like I don't have to go like, oh, he's coming, let me open my garage door. Let me open my smart home app for my garage door and all that stuff.
I just point out just before we get off that, because that thing was awesome, Amazon delivery key, and then they started charging like $4 a delivery for it, and then I just don't use it anymore. They have to pay. Yeah, you have to pay for it now. They used to have a camera that came with it that stopped working, and now they charge for delivery. So I just don't do it anymore. But it was super cool when they had it.
Amazon's getting as bad as Google at starting and abandoning projects. I'll co-sign Mike's wish there, but I think something I wish that could happen a lot sooner is the home app needs to be just completely ground up redesigned. The last home app redesign was a pretty minor update to how the tiles are laid out, but it's this whole weird thing with like multiple homes on different screens in a menu that doesn't work the way menus work in other apps, and they have weird backgrounds and all this other stuff. It just needs to look like all the other Apple stuff. And they need much better interfaces for things like lights with switches and dimmers and all this. Like, I think anything in iOS where you have to press and hold to get a different control confuses the hell out of people. And so it needs to get away from that.
Well, with WWDC in June, maybe it will be a sizable part of the presentation.
At this rate, WWDC is going to be like 5 hours long because they have a lot to address.
We're getting close enough that I think we can say probably they're not going to announce new products. Usually that would have leaked by now. And even though if there's any of them, it's that sort of HomePad thing we talked about, because that was already supposed to be announced this spring. And so apparently that's far enough along in the process where they're ready to pull the trigger, and it's a software wait, right? So that might be something they announce and then gets released in the fall with the big software updates.
We haven't heard anything from the supply chain folks about, who keep an eye on displays, because you would think, an order of, 100,000 8x9 displays, whatever their size is, by Apple would have, caught someone's eye, but we haven't heard anything like that.
Yeah, if they show or tell any of this at WWDC, it wouldn't be released then. It would be like, and this is coming in the fall, because they'd be already be in like early production for these things, right? This stuff would be. It takes a couple months, especially if you want to send them, especially for things that are inexpensive that they send by ship, that they're not willing to fly over. Like early iPhone shipments, they're willing to fly them over. If you going by ship adds a few weeks, right? So.
Well, that does it for this episode of the Macworld Podcast, episode 931. Thanks to Jason Cross.
Thank you.
Thanks to Michael Simon.
Thank you, sir.
And thanks to you, the audience. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to the Macworld Podcast in the podcast app, on Spotify, on YouTube at the Macworld Podcast channel, or through any other podcast app. Do you have any comments or questions? Send us an email at podcast@macworld.com or follow us through Blue Sky, Facebook, or Threads. Just search for the Macworld logo. Just search for Macworld and look for the Blue Mouse logo. Join us in the next episode of the Macworld Podcast as we talk about the latest in the world of Apple. See you next time. I tried not to read my script on that, and of course I messed it up. So.
That's a lot of parts to remember.
Well, I've said it like, what, a couple hundred times now? You would think I would know it.
I think it's one of those things like
It's
like
the crutch thing.
Yeah, I've gone to the same place dozens of times, but always with my GPS on.
Yeah.
And if I didn't turn my GPS off, I wouldn't know how to find it.
Oh, did we just
Get
lose
there.
Jason?
It's Jason, yeah.
Jason
Yeah.
Yeah, it froze up there.
froze for a little.
Yeah, everything
I
froze.
understand exactly what you were saying, though. You didn't
Yeah.
even need to finish the sentence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I've been taking my son to his hitting coach for, I don't know, a year and a half. And I swear to God, I couldn't get there with that GPS.
Right.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you force yourself to do it a few times,
Right,
you
you'll
then you
remember
would know it.
Yeah,
Right? But I never
yeah.
do. It's just
Right.
it's just on. As soon as I get in the car, it's just on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.